So we have a new food pyramid making the rounds. And before we all start reacting, I thought it would be important to hop on here and help us think through it. Now, who am I? My name is Dr. Kazzi. I'm a registered dietitian of over 10 years. I've been studying nutrition for over 20 years. I have a BS and a master's in nutrition and dietetics, and I have a PhD in rehabilitation science. But let me tell you, I feel like I've learned so much more after I completed school than when I was in it, but that's a whole other story. So what we're seeing with this new food pyramid, I think, is more of a shift in thinking. It's definitely a wild pivot from what we've seen before, but I don't think it's a verdict. I mean, there is definitely room for improvement. First off, I want to explain that food pyramids are population tools. They're not individual prescriptions. And I think part of the emotional reaction that we're seeing online is possibly because people are taking this as an individual prescription, and this wasn't designed for that. Food pyramids are designed to reflect policy and economics and feasibility. They're not personalized physiology guides. For me as a clinician, that's very clear, but for the general public, I think it's important to clarify that. So what were the fundamental changes? So one of the more obvious changes is that it's definitely more protein and vegetable forward with a slightly less emphasis on fruits, which I think is very interesting. And there's definitely a more neutral, permissive stance on saturated fats. There's a recommendation to consume full fat dairy and even to include butter, which is huge. And of course, there's this very obvious de-emphasis on grain-derived carbohydrates. The de-emphasis on grains is pretty strong. It's less than half what it used to be. It's important to understand why this shift is happening. It's mainly because of insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction. The one-size-fits-all carbohydrate-centered meals simply did not work for many people. So now, blood sugar regulation, satiety, and muscle preservation are at the forefront and the center of this guide. I don't think this guide is demonizing grains. I think it's just putting grains in its rightful spot as it pertains to the current health of the United States. As a clinician, I knew this years ago, but in a world where an organization is so heavily influenced by politics, I can understand how information that should have been out there years ago is just now coming out. So when do guides like the food pyramid, especially the one that we have now, when is it helpful and when does it fail? So where a food guide is helpful is when it's acting as a population tool. So there's an emphasis on whole foods, which I love. That's probably the best part about this pyramid. Also emphasis on the reduction of UPFs or ultra-processed foods, which is great. But again, it's a population tool. So for example, I worked in a school district in the nutrition services department for 4 years managing a wellness grant. And it was helpful to have things like the My Plate. We had the My Plate at the time as a guide to help families and children understand what their plate should look like. So it's useful as a guide, but it definitely is not helpful when it comes to metabolic diversity, to labs, to the life stage from infancy to elderly, to insulin sensitivity. So for those reasons, it's useful as a reference, but definitely not as a prescription. But this alone tells us that the conversation around metabolism has taken a dramatic shift, which is good news. Just keep this in mind. No pyramid knows your labs, your hormones, or your history. We each have very unique gut microfloras that are as unique as a thumbprint, which has been influenced by a long history of dietary and lifestyle practices. Pyramid simply does not take that into account. It's a very general recommendation guide for the generally healthy population. What this pyramid really shows us is that nutrition is moving away from ideology, and it is actually getting closer to our physiology, which again is good news. So as a seasoned dietitian, I would recommend investing in learning how to biohack your own body. Check your labs regularly, learn what they mean, and take the initiative to assume the power and the accountability to change your daily habits to improve those labs. Also, to dramatically improve your metabolic health, prioritize muscle building. And there's no excuse, there's always room for improvement. That's all for now. Drop your questions below, like this video, subscribe if you already haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next one.